In the merciless 1847 Arizona desert, a widower hears a child's desperate cry, sparking a heart-pounding race against time to save her from a dark past threatening to reclaim her. Welcome to Life Bond Tales. Like and share the story with those who need love. The year was 1847, and the Arizona desert sprawled like a merciless furnace, its cracked earth swallowing hopes as easily as it claimed lives. Samuel Carter, a widower of 39, rode alone on his mare, Hope, her hooves stirring clouds of dust that clung to his weathered face and faded denim shirt. 3 years prior, scarlet fever had torn his world apart, stealing his wife, Eliza, whose gentle smile once lit his days, and their son Jacob, whose laughter still echoed in Samuel's restless dreams. Now he drifted toward Ironwood, a fledgling mining town rumored to offer work and a chance to rebuild, though Samuel doubted anything could mend the hollowness in his chest. The sun blazed overhead, relentless, turning the air into a shimmering haze that blurred the jagged outlines of distant buttes. The only sounds were the rhythmic creak of his saddle and the mournful howl of wind weaving through the canyons, carrying with it the ghosts of his past. Samuel adjusted his worn hat, its brim casting a thin shadow over eyes that had seen too much loss, his calloused hands steady on the reins as he urged Hope onward. Each mile felt like a penance, a journey to outrun memories of Jacob's small, hand in his or Eliza's voice singing softly by the firelight. Suddenly, a faint cry pierced the desolate silence, sharp and desperate, like a wounded creature pleading for mercy. Samuel pulled Hope to a halt, his heart thudding against his ribs. He tilted his head, straining to listen, half convinced it was a trick of the wind or a coyote's wail. But the sound came again, unmistakably human, young, and raw with fear. Dismounting, he tethered Hope to a gnarled mesquite tree and followed the cry, his boots crunching on sun-scorched gravel, his pulse quickening with a mix of dread and urgency. The desert was no place for a child. Its heat could kill within, hours, its nights even crueler. Cresting a low ridge, he spotted her. A small girl, no more than 5, curled among a cluster of prickly pear cacti, their spines casting cruel shadows over her trembling form. Her dark hair was matted with dust, her cotton dress torn at the hem, stained with dirt and streaked with dried tears. Her bare feet, bloodied and blistered from the unforgiving terrain, told a story of a desperate flight. Her eyes, a striking green like new spring grass, met his, wide with terror and exhaustion, and her cracked lips moved faintly. "Don't let them take me, mister," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread, nearly lost to the wind. Samuel's breath caught, a sharp pang slicing through him as he saw Jacob in her frail frame, in the way her small hands clutched at nothing but air. Kneeling beside her, he unslung his canteen, gently tilting it to her lips, watching as she drank in small, desperate sips, water dribbling down her chin. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, his voice rough from days of silence but softened by a tenderness he hadn't felt in years. "Lily," she murmured, her eyes fluttering as if the effort to speak drained her last reserves. Before he could ask more, her head lolled, her body succumbing to dehydration and fear. Samuel's heart clenched. He knew the signs of a body pushed too far. He scooped her up, shocked by how light she felt, like a sparrow in his arms, all fragile bones and feverish skin, her breath shallow against his chest. He carried her to Hope, carefully lifting her into the saddle and climbing up behind her, securing her small form against him with one arm. "Hold on, Lily," he whispered, his voice steady despite the storm of questions in his mind. Who could abandon a child in this wasteland? The thought churned his stomach, anger flaring alongside a fierce protectiveness he hadn't known he still possessed. As Hope plodded toward Ironwood, Samuel's mind raced. He thought of Jacob, how he'd promised to always keep him safe, a promise broken by a fever no medicine could tame. Now, holding Lily, he felt that vow resurface, unbidden, but undeniable. The desert stretched on, vast and indifferent, but Ironwood's faint outline began to emerge on the horizon, a promise of safety for the girl who weighed nothing in his arms. Lily stirred once, whimpering. "They left me. Said I was bad. Her." Words slurred with exhaustion. Samuel's jaw tightened. his grip on her gentle but firm, as if he could shield her from whatever cruelty had driven her to this place. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of fire, and Samuel felt a spark of purpose ignite within him, a chance to save someone, to be more than a man haunted by loss. He didn't know Lily's story, but he knew he couldn't leave her to the desert's mercy. As they neared Ironwood, the town's wooden rooftops glinting in the fading light, Samuel glanced down at Lily, her breathing steadier now, her small hand curled against his shirt. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it for the girl who had somehow found him in the vastness of this unforgiving land. The dusty trail to Ironwood stretched beneath Hope's steady hooves as Samuel Carter rode with Lily cradled against him, her small body warm but limp from exhaustion. The desert's heat had begun to wane with the setting sun, casting long shadows that danced across the rocky terrain. But Samuel's mind was far from the cooling air. Lily's whispered words, "They left me, said I was bad," echoed in his head, stirring a quiet fury he hadn't felt since the days he'd raged against the fever that took his family. He glanced down at her dark curls plastered to her forehead, her green eyes closed in fitful sleep, and wondered what kind of cruelty could drive someone to abandon a child so young. Ironwood's wooden buildings came into view, their weathered facades glowing faintly in the twilight, a small oasis of life in the vast desert. Samuel guided Hope toward the town's only doctor's office, a squat building with a sign reading Dr. Amos Fielding, physician. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and old wood, and Dr. Fielding, a wiry man with graying hair and kind eyes, took one look at Lily and ushered them to an examination table. "Good Lord, where'd you find this child?" he asked, his hands gentle. As he checked her pulse, Samuel recounted finding her among the cacti, her bloodied feet and desperate plea. The doctor's face darkened as he cleaned her wounds, muttering about the inhumanity of leaving a girl to die. "She's dehydrated and half-starved, but she's strong," he said, wrapping her feet in clean bandages. "A day or two more out there, and she wouldn't have made it." Samuel nodded, his throat tight, the weight of that near loss settling heavy on his shoulders. He carried Lily to the town's boarding house, where Mrs. Abigail Turner, a stout woman with a warm smile and flour-dusted apron, gasped at the sight of the girl. "Poor lamb," she cooed, offering a room and a cot for Lily to rest. As Samuel laid her down, Lily stirred, her small hand clutching his sleeve. "Mr. Samuel, don't go," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear of being left again. He sat beside her, brushing a curl from her face, and promised, "I'm right here, little one." Over the next few days, Samuel worked odd jobs at the Ironwood, mine hauling equipment and clearing debris, while Mrs. Turner watched Lily, feeding her broth and biscuits to restore her strength. During evenings, Samuel returned to the boarding house where Lily greeted him with shy smiles that grew brighter each day. One night, as they sat by a flickering oil lamp, he asked gently, "Lily, can you tell me who left you out there?" Her eyes dropped to her lap, fingers twisting the edge of her new dress, a gift from Mrs. Turner. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "My step-pa Amos Reed and his wife Clara. They said I was bad luck, that I made their crops die and their cows get sick. They took me out in their wagon far from home and told me to stay put. Then they rode off." Samuel's hands clenched, his knuckles whitening, but he kept his voice steady. "You're not bad luck, Lily. Ain't no child to blame for crops or cows." She looked up, her green eyes searching his face, and asked, "Why'd they hate me so?" Samuel hesitated, the question cutting close to his own unanswered grief. Why had fate taken his family? He took her small hand, his calloused fingers dwarfing hers, and said, "Some folks just carry meanness in their hearts and they put it on others to feel better. That's their failing, not yours." Lily nodded slowly, as if trying to believe him, and leaned against his arm, her trust a fragile gift. To lighten the mood, he shared a story of Jacob, how his son once tried to ride a calf and ended up covered in mud, laughing until he couldn't breathe. Lily giggled, her first real laugh, and Samuel felt a warmth spread through him, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Mrs. Turner, bustling in with a tray of cornbread, caught the moment and winked at Samuel, whispering, "You're good for her, Mr. Carter." As the days passed, Lily began to open up, telling Samuel about her mother, Mary, who died when she was 3. Her memories hazy, but filled with love, soft songs and warm hugs. She spoke of Amos and Clara with a shudder, describing their cold glares and harsh words, how they'd blamed her for every misfortune since her mother's death. Samuel listened, his heart aching for her, and shared small pieces of his own past. How Eliza's apple pie was the best in their old town, how Jacob used to chase fireflies. These exchanges built a quiet bond, each story a thread weaving them closer. Yet, beneath his growing affection for Lily, Samuel felt a gnawing unease. Reeds had left her to die, but what if they came looking for her? Their motives were unclear, guilt, greed, or something darker, but Samuel sensed they weren't done with her. He kept these fears to himself, not wanting to dim the light returning to Lily's eyes. One evening, as they walked to the general store to buy her a pair of shoes, Lily slipped her hand into his, her small fingers trusting and warm. "Mr. Samuel," she said, looking up at him, "are you going to keep me?" The question hit him like a gust of desert wind, stirring memories of Jacob's voice asking for one more story. He knelt to her level, meeting her gaze. "Long as you want me to, Lily, I'll be here." Her smile, small but radiant, was a promise of hope, but Samuel knew the road. Ahead might hold trouble. The Reed's shadow loomed, and he'd need to be ready to protect her no matter the cost. Ironwood buzzed with the rhythm of a frontier town, its main street alive with the clatter of wagons and the chatter of miners, but Samuel Carter's world narrowed to the small girl at his side as they walked back from the general store, her new shoes scuffing the dirt. Lily's hand rested in his, her green eyes brighter now, though they still darted nervously at sudden sounds. A habit, born of fear that hadn't fully faded. 3 weeks had passed since he'd found her in the desert, and with each day, Samuel felt the weight of his old grief lighten, replaced by a fierce determination to keep her safe. Mrs. Abigail Turner had become a steady presence, tending to Lily during Samuel's long hours at the mine, and Dr. Fielding checked on her regularly, marveling at her resilience. The townsfolk, too, had taken to the girl, offering her sweets or small toys, their warmth wrapping her like a quilt against the chill of her past. But on this crisp morning, as Samuel prepared to head to the mine, a cloud of dust rose on the horizon, heralding the arrival of 3 riders. Their horses, lathered with sweat, galloped into town, and Samuel's gut twisted as he recognized the lean, hard-eyed man leading them, Amos Reed, Lily's stepfather. Beside him rode Clara, her face pinched and sour, and their son Nathaniel, a lanky young man with a sullen scowl. Lily froze, her hand tightening in Samuel's, her breath hitching as she whispered, "They found me." Samuel knelt, shielding her with his broad frame, and murmured, "Stay close, Lily. I won't let them near you." The Reeds dismounted, Amos clutching a rolled paper, his voice loud enough to draw a crowd. "That's our girl, mister," he barked, pointing at Lily. "You got no right keeping her from her kin." Samuel stood, keeping Lily behind him, his voice calm but edged with steel. "Kin don't leave a child to die in the desert." The accusation hung in the air, and murmurs rippled through the onlookers, miners, shopkeepers, and mothers who'd heard whispers of Lily's story. Clara's eyes flickered with unease, but Amos stepped forward, brandishing the paper. "We got legal claim signed by a judge in Tucson. Says she's ours, and you're a thief." Samuel's heart sank at the mention of a judge, but something about Amos's smugness didn't sit right. The man's clean shirt and Clara's pressed dress suggested they hadn't been scouring the desert for a lost child. "Let's see it," Samuel said, his tone steady. Amos hesitated, then thrust the document forward, but Samuel didn't take it, his eyes locked on the man's. "Lily says you left her out there to die. That true?" Amos's face reddened, and Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Lily's gaze. "She's a liar," Clara snapped, though her voice wavered. "Always spinning tales, that one." Lily pressed closer to Samuel, trembling, and whispered, "They said I cursed their land, Mr. Samuel. They drove me out and didn't come back." Her raw honesty cut through the crowd's murmurs, and Mrs. Turner, who joined the gathering, gasped, her hand over her heart. Samuel's jaw clenched, his hands itching to act, but he kept them still, knowing a fight now could cost him Lily. "If she's yours," he said, "why'd you wait weeks to come looking? And why's she terrified of you?" Amos's eyes narrowed, his hand brushing the pistol at his hip. "Don't matter what you think, Drifter. The law's on our side. Hand her over or we'll fetch the sheriff." The threat hung heavy, but the townsfolk closed ranks, their faces hard with distrust. Dr. Fielding stepped forward, his voice firm. "I examined this child when she arrived. She was half dead from starvation and exposure. No loving family does that." A miner, grizzled and broad-shouldered, added, "We don't take kindly to folks who hurt kids around here." Amos's bravado faltered under the town's collective glare, but he held up the paper again. "This says she's my wife's daughter from her first marriage. We took her in out of duty and we'll take her back." Samuel studied the reeds, noting Nathaniel's downcast eyes and Clara's tense posture, as if she'd rather be anywhere else. "Duty don't look like abandoning a girl to the coyotes," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of truth. Lily's small voice broke the silence, quivering but clear. "You never wanted me. You said I was the devil's child." The crowd gasped, and Mrs. Turner pulled Lily into a protective embrace, glaring at the reeds. Amos's face twisted with rage, but before he could speak, Samuel took a step forward, his presence unyielding. "You're not taking her. Not today. Not ever." The standoff stretched taut, Amos's hand hovering near his gun, but the townsfolk's murmurs grew louder, a warning of their own. Clara tugged at Amos's sleeve, whispering, "Let's go, Amos, we'll come back with the law." Nathaniel nodded, already turning toward his horse, and Amos spat on the ground, his eyes burning with resentment. "This ain't over, Carter," he growled, mounting up. The reeds rode out, leaving a trail of dust and unease. Samuel lifted Lily into his arms, her small frame shaking but safe. Mrs. Turner patted his shoulder, her eyes fierce. "You did right, Samuel. We'll stand by you." Dr. Fielding offered to speak to the sheriff about the Reeds' claims, and other townsfolk pledged their support, their voices a chorus of solidarity. As Samuel carried Lily back to the boarding house, her arms tight around his neck, he felt the weight of her trust and the looming threat of the Reeds' return. They had papers, forged or not, and that meant trouble was coming. But looking into Lily's eyes, now glinting with a fragile hope, Samuel knew he'd fight any battle to keep her safe. The town's support was a lifeline, but he'd need more than words to protect the girl who'd become his reason to live again. The days following the Reeds' confrontation settled into a fragile calm in Ironwood, but Samuel Carter carried a quiet vigilance, his eyes scanning the horizon each evening. As he returned from the mine, Lily, now a constant light in his life, seemed to sense the undercurrent of tension, but clung to the routine they'd built together, her small steps echoing his on the boarding house porch. Mrs. Abigail Turner had transformed her kitchen into a haven for Lily, teaching her to knead dough and braid her hair, filling the air with warmth and the scent of baking bread. Samuel marveled at Lily's resilience. Her laughter, once rare, now spilled freely when Mrs. Turner teased her about flour-dusted cheeks or when she chased the boarding-house cat Tinker through the yard. Each evening, Samuel sat with her under the glow of an oil lamp, listening to her chatter about the day's small victories, a perfect biscuit, a new word learned from Mrs. Turner's old primer. One night, as crickets sang outside, Lily climbed into his lap, her green eyes bright with a question. "Mr. Samuel, can you tell me a story about your boy?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Samuel's chest tightened, the memory of Jacob sharp, but he nodded, weaving a tale of how his son once tried to lasso a chicken, ending in a feathered chaos that had Eliza laughing for days. Lily giggled, her head resting against his shoulder, and asked for another. These moments, simple yet profound, stitched their hearts closer, each story a bridge between their wounds. Samuel began to share more of his past, telling Lily about Eliza's love for wildflowers, how she'd tuck them into her hair, and how Jacob would sneak extra pie when he thought no one noticed. In return, Lily spoke of her mother, Mary, her voice wistful as she recalled a lullaby about a river and stars, though the words were fuzzy in her young memory. "Mama said I'd always have a home in the sky," she whispered one evening, pointing to the twinkling desert night. Samuel, moved by her innocence, promised to teach her the names of the stars, and they spent hours tracing constellations, her small finger following his to find Orion's belt. At the mine, Samuel worked harder, his hands blistered from hauling, or driven by a vision of a small house where Lily could have a room of her own, maybe a dog to run with. He saved every coin, tucking them into a tin under his bed, dreaming of a life beyond the boarding house, a ranch, perhaps, with wide fields for Lily to explore. Mrs. Turner noticed the change in him, remarking one morning as she handed him coffee, "You're not just surviving anymore, Samuel. You're building something." He nodded, realizing she was right. Lily had given him a reason to look forward, not just back. The town embraced them too. The blacksmith crafted a tiny horseshoe. Charm for Lily, and the schoolteacher, Miss Harper, offered to start her lessons early. Noting her quick mind, Lily bloomed under this care, her shy smiles growing bold, though she still flinched at loud voices or sudden movements, shadows of her past lingering. One afternoon, as they planted marigold seeds in Mrs. Turner's garden, a gift from a traveling merchant, Lily proudly showed Samuel her first sprout, her face glowing with pride. "Look, Mr. Samuel, it's alive because I took care of it," she exclaimed, and he knelt beside her, ruffling her hair, his heart swelling at her joy. But beneath this newfound peace, Samuel's unease grew. Whispers reached him from miners who'd passed through nearby towns, tales of Amos Reed asking about a drifter with a little girl, his voice laced with venom. Samuel kept this from Lily, not wanting to dim her light, but he confided in Mrs. Turner one evening as Lily slept. "They're not done with her," he said, his voice low, hands clasped tight around a mug. Mrs. Turner's eyes hardened, and she replied, "If they come back, they'll have to go through all of us." Her words steadied him, but Samuel knew the Reeds' forged papers could sway a corrupt official, and he vowed to be ready. To distract Lily from the tension he couldn't fully hide, he carved her a small wooden horse, its edges smoothed with care, and presented it to her one evening. "It's like hope," he said as her eyes lit up, clutching the toy to her chest. "Will you keep it safe for me?" she asked, and he promised, the weight of her trust anchoring him further. Their evenings became a ritual, stories, stargazing, and quiet moments where Lily's laughter chased away the ghosts of Samuel's past. One night as they sat on the porch, Lily looked up at him, her voice small but certain. "Mr. Samuel, you're like a papa to me." The words hit him like a warm desert breeze, stirring emotions he'd thought long buried. He pulled her close, unable to speak, and realized that in saving her, she was saving him too, giving him a family when he'd thought he'd lost that forever. Yet the specter of the Reeds lingered, a dark cloud threatening their fragile happiness. Samuel began asking around town, learning from a traveling peddler that Amos had been seen in Tucson, flashing money and talking of reclaiming what's his. The news chilled Samuel, but he hid it behind a smile when Lily ran to him, showing off a drawing she'd made of them riding hope together. As he tucked her into bed that night, her wooden horse clutched tight, he whispered, "You're safe, with me, little one," and prayed he could keep that promise. The bond they'd forged was a lifeline, but Samuel knew the Reeds' return could unravel it all, and he steeled himself for the fight ahead, determined to protect the girl who'd become his daughter in all but name. The sun hung low over Ironwood, painting the sky in streaks of crimson as Samuel Carter trudged home from the mine, his muscles aching from a long day's labor, but his heart light with thoughts of Lily waiting for him with one of her bright drawings or a new story about Tinker, the cat. The past weeks had woven a fragile peace, with Lily's laughter and the town's support anchoring him in a way he hadn't felt since losing his family. But as he neared the boarding house, a chill settled over him, the street too quiet, the air heavy with an unspoken wrongness. Mrs. Abigail Turner burst from the door, her face pale, eyes red with tears. "Samuel, they took her," she gasped, clutching his arm. "The Reeds came with some official-looking man waving papers. Lily screamed for you, but they dragged her away." Samuel's blood turned to ice, the world narrowing to a single searing thought. Lily was gone. He pressed Mrs. Turner for details. 3 riders, Amos, Clara, and a stranger in a black suit, claiming to be a deputy from Tucson, had stormed in an hour ago, their forged custody papers enough to intimidate the townsfolk. They headed west, toward their homestead. Mrs. Turner said, her voice breaking. "She fought so hard, Samuel, calling your name." Without a word, Samuel ran to the stable, saddling Hope with hands that shook from rage and fear. The townsfolk gathered, offering horses and help, but Samuel shook his head. He couldn't risk others in what might turn violent. He rode out alone, the desert swallowing the town's lights as Hope's hooves pounded the earth, each beat echoing Lily's desperate cries in his mind. The Reeds' homestead lay 10 miles west, a wretched sprawl of sagging fences and wilted crops, its decay a testament to their failures. As Samuel approached, the faint glow of a lantern flickered from a ramshackle shed behind the house, and Lily's sobbing reached him, a sound that tore through his chest like a blade. He dismounted, tying Hope to a post, and crept closer, his heart pounding as he spotted Amos standing guard outside the shed, a rifle cradled in his arms. Clara and Nathaniel were nowhere in sight, but the stranger in the black suit lounged on the porch, his badge glinting faintly. Samuel's eyes darted to the shed where Lily's cries grew sharper, her voice pleading, "Mr. Samuel, please." His vision blurred with fury, but he forced himself to stay calm, knowing a rash move could cost her life. He circled the homestead, using the cover of a dry gully to approach the shed from behind. Through a crack in the warped boards, he saw Lily, her wrists bound, her face streaked with tears but defiant as she kicked at the door. The sight of her courage steeled him, and he whispered through the crack, "I'm here, Lily. Be still." Her sobs quieted, her eyes wide with hope as she nodded. But before Samuel could pry the door open, a shout rang out. Nathaniel, returning from the house, had spotted him. "Pa, he's here!" the young man yelled, and Amos spun, his rifle raised. Samuel ducked behind the shed as a shot splintered the wood above his head, the crack echoing across the desert. "You got no business here, Carter," Amos roared. "She's ours. By law." Samuel's voice was steady, cutting through the night. "No law gives you the right to hurt a child." He edged toward the house, drawing Amos's attention, when a new danger emerged. A curl of smoke rising from the kitchen window, unnoticed by the Reeds in their haste. A cooking fire, left unattended, had sparked, flames licking the dry wooden walls. Samuel seized the moment, shouting, "Your house is burning, Amos." The distraction worked. Amos cursed, turning toward the growing blaze, while Nathaniel and the deputy rushed to help. Samuel sprinted to the shed, smashing the lock with a rock, and pulled Lily into his arms. She clung to him, sobbing, "I knew. You'd come, I knew it." The fire spread fast, flames roaring as the Reeds scrambled to save their belongings, their shouts drowning out any pursuit. Samuel carried Lily to Hope, lifting her into the saddle and mounting behind her, urging the horse into a gallop as the homestead glowed orange against the night sky. Lily's small hands gripped his shirt, her trembling easing as they rode, the desert wind cool against their faces. "You're safe now," Samuel murmured, his voice thick with relief, though he knew the danger wasn't over. The Reeds forged. Papers and the deputy's involvement meant they could try again, and Samuel's mind raced with plans to protect her. As they neared Ironwood, the town's lights a faint promise in the distance, Lily looked up at him, her voice small but fierce. "You didn't leave me, Mr. Samuel. You're my papa now." The words hit him harder than any bullet, filling the hollow spaces in his heart with a love he'd thought lost forever. He tightened his arm around her, vowing to fight any force, man or law, that tried to take her from him. The fire's glow faded behind them, but Samuel knew the Reeds' greed or spite might not burn out so easily. He'd need to take Lily somewhere safe, perhaps to a judge who could unravel the Reeds' lies, but for now he focused on her warmth against him, her trust a beacon guiding them home. The townsfolk would be waiting, ready to rally around them, and Samuel felt a surge of gratitude for the community that had become their family. As Hope's hooves thundered toward Ironwood, Samuel whispered a silent prayer, not to lose this second chance at fatherhood, this girl who'd brought light back to his world. Ironwood's streets were quiet, as Samuel Carter rode in with Lily nestled against him, her small frame finally still after the terror of her abduction. The boarding house glowed warmly in the pre-dawn light, and Mrs. Abigail Turner met them at the door, her arms enveloping Lily in a fierce hug as tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. Word of the Reeds' actions had spread, and the townsfolk gathered, their faces a mix of relief and indignation, offering blankets and hot tea as Samuel recounted the rescue. Dr. Fielding examined Lily, noting bruises on her wrists, but no lasting harm, and declared her a fighter, his voice thick with admiration. Samuel, exhausted but resolute, knew the Reeds' forged papers posed a lingering threat, and he couldn't rest until Lily's safety was secured. The next morning, he made a decision. He'd take her to Phoenix, where Judge Thomas Hargrove, a man known for his fairness, held court. With Mrs. Turner's blessing and a packed satchel of food, Samuel and Lily set out, hope carrying them across the desert's vast expanse. In Phoenix, a bustling hub of adobe buildings and dusty streets, Samuel presented their case to Judge Hargrove, a stern man with a silver beard and eyes that missed nothing. Lily, clutching Samuel's hand, told her story with a clarity that belied her years, how the Reeds had abandoned her, blamed her for their woes and snatched her back with false claims. Samuel added his account, his voice steady as he described finding her in the desert, their weeks together, and the fire that had aided her rescue. The judge studied the Reeds' papers, his brow furrowing at inconsistencies in the signature and seal. "These look dubious," he said, promising a thorough investigation. Samuel and Lily stayed in Phoenix, lodging at a modest inn, while Hargrove sent inquiries to Tucson. Days turned to weeks, and Lily, though anxious, found joy in small things, exploring the town's market where she marveled at colorful fabrics, or listening to Samuel's stories of his old ranch under starlit skies. One evening, as they sat outside the inn, Lily traced a constellation and said, "Mama's up there, isn't she, with your Eliza and Jacob?" Samuel nodded, his throat tight, and replied, "I reckon they're all watching, proud of how brave you are." Her smile, soft but certain, was a balm to his heart. After 3 weeks, Judge Hargrove summoned them back. His findings were clear. The Reeds' papers were forged, the so-called deputy a hired man with no authority. Amos Reed bribed a clerk. "In Tucson," Hargrove declared, his voice firm. "Their abandonment of this child voids any claim, legal or otherwise." He sentenced Amos to a year in jail for forgery and barred Clara and Nathaniel from approaching Lily. Then, turning to Samuel, he asked, "Mr. Carter, are you prepared to adopt this child as your own?" Samuel looked at Lily, her green eyes wide with hope, and answered, "With all my heart, Your Honor." The judge smiled, a rare softness in his face, and proclaimed, "Lily Carter, you are now this man's daughter." The words sealed a bond already, forged in the desert, and Lily flung her arms around Samuel, whispering, "Papa." Back in Ironwood, the town celebrated, Mrs. Turner baking a towering cake adorned with wildflowers, while miners and shopkeepers toasted to the new family. Lily, now officially Lily Carter, danced through the crowd, her laughter a melody that lifted every heart. Dr. Fielding pulled Samuel aside, noting, "She's a different girl now, no more fear in those eyes." Samuel nodded, seeing the truth in her easy smiles and the way she ran to him without hesitation. Months later, a stranger arrived, a woman named Eleanor Grayson, elegant but kind, with silver hair and eyes the same green as Lily's. She introduced herself as Mary's aunt, having spent years searching for her niece's child after learning of her sister's death. "I heard from Judge Hargrove," she said, tears brimming as she looked at Lily, "and I had to see her." Over tea at Mrs. Turner's, Eleanor shared stories of Mary's childhood, her love for music and flowers, painting a picture of a mother Lily barely remembered. "I'm not here to take her," Eleanor assured Samuel, her voice earnest. "I want to be her family, to give her what I can. Love, stories, a future." Samuel, seeing Lily's curiosity and joy at meeting her great-aunt, agreed, and Eleanor promised to visit often, bringing gifts and a trust fund for Lily's education. 3 years later, in 1850, Samuel and Lily stood on the porch of their new ranch outside Ironwood, its fields green with promise, a gift from Samuel's savings and Eleanor's support. Lily, now 8, thrived at the town school, her quick, mind-earning praise from Miss Harper, who called her a natural teacher. She tended their small herd of cattle with Samuel, her wooden horse tucked in her pocket, and dreamed aloud of helping other children someday, perhaps as a schoolteacher or doctor. One evening, as they sat on a swing Samuel had built, the desert sky ablaze with stars, Lily asked, "Papa, Do you think Mama and your family brought us together? Samuel pulled her close, his heart full. I believe they did, little one. They knew. We needed each other. Lily nestled against him, content, her dreams as vast as the horizon. The ranch was their home, filled with laughter, the lowing of cattle, and the promise of a future neither had dared imagine. Samuel reflected on the journey, from a broken man in the desert to a father again, his life reshaped by a girl who'd given him hope. The coyotes howled in the distance, no longer lonely but part of the wild beauty that had bound them. Lily's hand in his was a reminder that love could rise from pain, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, stronger than any storm.